Hello again. In this tutorial, we're going to continue looking at loops, but we're specifically going to look at the while loop. Now, previously we had looked at a for loop, and I had mentioned there that a for loop is good if you know where you want to start and where you want to finish. For example, if we wanted to count between 1 and 10, I know that I'm going to start at 1 and I'm going to end up at 10, and so I have good, well-defined boundaries in that case. There are times, though, where we want to repeat something, but we don't know how many times we'll need to repeat it. For example, imagine that we want to read in a number between 1 and 100 from the user, and they enter in the number 101. Well, we would want to re-prompt them for a number between 1 and 100, and let's say that they enter in the value 105. We would want to keep prompting them until they've satisfied the condition that they've entered a value between 1 and 100. So let's look at the while loop because this is a good situation to use it. But before we begin, let's rewrite what we had done with the for loop where we counted between 0 and 10. Let's rewrite that as a while loop just so you can see how flexible the while loop really is. So what I'll do is I'll start by declaring a counter here. Float I starts out at 0. And then I'll type in the structure here of the while loop, which looks like this. Okay, now we're still going to have all three parts that you saw in the for loop, the initialization, the test to continue, and then make some kind of progress. But look at what's going on here. In line 5, we've pulled the initialization outside of the while loop. Now on the inside of these parentheses, we're only going to have one thing in this case, and it's going to be our test to continue. So long as I is less than 10, we're going to execute everything between the opening and the closing curly, just like we had in the for loop. Okay, now what are we going to do on the inside? Well, the same thing that we did last time. System.out.println I plus a space. Or actually, I think that was not println, it was just print. So let's change that. And then notice that there's one thing that's missing here. We had in the for loop some kind of progress that was being made, and that was our I++, or I think it was I plus equals 0.5. So we still need to add that in. So I'm going to put it right here. I plus equals 0.5. Semicolon. Okay, so if I were to run this now and save my changes, you can see that we get the exact same behavior that we had using the for loop. So again, just to compare the for loop and the while loop, you can see that we still have an initialization phase. We still have a test to continue here on the inside of the while, and then we've made some kind of progress inside the loop. What happens if I removed line 9 here? Just get rid of that guy. And what would happen now if I didn't make some kind of progress inside the loop? Well, if I were to run this, and you're going to get some really bad performance here, but watch what's going to happen. You're going to see we have a whole bunch of zeros, and that makes sense because we didn't increment the value of I. Now realize if you look right here, the program hasn't terminated. It's actually still running. If I were to take this slider over, you can see that we have a whole slew of these zeros that are on the screen. Okay? Which is why this guy right here, this stop button, was put into the interface. So I'm going to click it a couple of times until it stops. Okay, so it's not the end of the world if you forget to do something like that, but it is a little tricky to remember that you have your stop button right here down in the lower right side. Okay, so going back to what I had originally talked about of getting some kind of user input, there's an old program called the cookie program, and we're going to recreate that here. Okay, so it's going to involve some user input. So let's strip this back down to its bare minimum structure. We'll take out all these different parts. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to want to do is to create a scanner object, just like we had previously. Scanner, and we'll call this one string scanner. Gets a new scanner, passing it system.in. Okay, and again, it can't find scanner, so if we import scanner, everything should work. Okay. Now the next thing that we're going to want to do is to declare a variable to hold the user input. So I'll say string user input, and we'll initialize it to the empty string. So the next part we need to do is to determine whether or not we need to continue prompting the user for this particular string. What we're asking them to do is to enter the word cookie. Now to do this, string comparison is slightly different. There's a temptation to say if the user input is equal to, or actually not equal to, the word cookie, then we'll want to continue. Now this is really not the way that we want to work with strings. Instead, we have to rewrite it like this. I'll say so long as user input is not equal to the word cookie, then we'll want to continue. So notice that we're going to use this dot equals method that's on the inside of user input. This is probably a little bit strange of syntax for you, but that's how we have to do this string comparison. So again, just as a reminder, this is saying so long as the user input is not equal to cookie, and that's what this guy right here is, the not operator. Okay, so long as the user hasn't typed in the word cookie, what are we going to do? Well, we'll system.out.println give me a cookie, and kind of confuse the user just a little bit, and then we'll read in whatever it is that they typed in, which would be user input gets string scanner dot next line. Okay, and then at the very end of that, if they actually have typed in the word cookie, then we can print something out to them to say, how about yum? Okay, so that's it. Let's go ahead and run it and see the behavior of this. So you can see down here it says give me a cookie. So I'll type in no, I don't want to. It says give me a cookie. You can say fine. It says give me a cookie. So you can see this is going to repeat so long as the user keeps typing in something that doesn't equal cookie. And eventually I could type in the word cookie, and then you could see yum appears on the screen. So hopefully this gives you a little bit more sense about the structure of a while loop and when it's appropriate to use one.